Should Manchester United sign Mason Mount? In my opinion, no, but I have different reasons for not wanting to sign him from most of the others that I've seen on social media. The majority of opinions on Mount as a potential Manchester United signing, to me, seem to end with people saying he is overrated because he's English, which I actually don't think is the case at all. Firstly, because I actually think he's become underrated because of that sentiment especially, but secondly because I actually don't think that English players are overrated anymore in 2023. Certainly during the mid-2010s when the England squad was dogshit, giving me PTSD with Smalling and Cahill at centre-back, and Joe Hart letting in P-rollers against Iceland. But now most people seem to use the examples of Harry Kane and Declan Rice to support their claim that English players are indeed overrated. But to me this is a clear sign of ball knowledge, as both players, certainly Harry Kane, are without doubt two of the best players in Europe in their positions and their specific roles. And just from looking through the England squad, you can see that Southgate has an immense amount of talent at his disposal, with players like James Maddison, Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Ivan Toney not even getting a look in at the moment. But whilst I would agree that Mount certainly isn't at the level of either Rice or Kane, he's still a very good player in that specific role that he plays, and to me he has a lot of similar characteristics to Bruno Fernandes, though not to the level of the Portuguese just yet. But maybe a more accurate comparison could be Aaron Ramsey, particularly during the 2013-14 season where he hit 10 goals in the Premier League for Arsenal from a central midfield position. But Mount is a much more complete midfielder than Ramsey ever was, and that is the main reason why so many top clubs seem to be interested in him. If we look at Mount's profile, he looks incredibly enticing. He's still only 24 years old and has already made 124 appearances in the Premier League across 4 seasons for Chelsea. Being English, he would also count as a homegrown player, something that a lot of people overlook when squad building, and the fact that he has 1 year left on his Chelsea contract should mean that he could be gettable for a decent price. From his FB ref report we can see that he does stand out in a few significant areas. Now I do consider Mount more of a midfielder than an attacking midfielder or winger, and so I will be comparing him statistically that way, as well as to other attacking midfielders on occasion as well. When compared against every other attacking midfielder and winger in the league this season, in 1,648 minutes he has played, Mount really doesn't look that impressive, ranking only in the 14th percentile for his non-penalty XG, despite overperforming it by 0.05 per 90, and ranking in the 42nd percentile, alongside ranking in the 56th percentile for his XG assisted. But when compared against midfielders, you can see that Mount ranks much higher for these metrics, around the 75th to 85th percentile range for his non-penalty goals and his XG assisted specifically. If we instead look at his FB ref report when compared to every other Premier League midfielder instead, you can start to see why he may be a good option to play in the three alongside Bruno Fernandes ahead of Casemiro in Ten Hag's midfield, as Mount is easily in the top 20 to 25% of Premier League midfielders when it comes to scoring and creating chances, understandably making him seem appealing to play that false 8 role that we have seen the likes of Bernardo Silva, Granit Xhaka and Christian Eriksen all be used in over the course of this season and previous seasons. And when you look at his progressive passing metrics, you can see why he may be more suitable to playing a midfield role, rather than more as a attacking midfielder who will sit between the lines constantly, as he is a pretty competent short, medium and long passer, with really no weaknesses there, whilst also being a high volume progressive passer as well, sitting around the 85th percentile for both his progressive passes and his passes into the final third, and sitting slightly lower around the 65th to 70th percentile range for his passes and his crosses into the penalty area. And this passing ability is backed up with the eye test as well, as Mount has a great range of passing, able to switch play with those driven passes from deep positions. Now like Bruno Fernandes, I do think sometimes Mount can be a bit wasteful with these long passes, and like Bruno he does complete around 57% of them, but Bruno completes just over 5 long passes per 90, whereas Mount is sitting just below 3 per 90. And so this may be an indication that Mount could be better used in deeper positions, where he can get on the ball and be used as a weapon to switch play quickly, something that would definitely suit the likes of Rashford, Garnacho and Antony, when United look to transition the attack at speed. In terms of his short passing, Mount is competent, but he doesn't excel in the same way that players like Kovacic or Caicedo do, though he does have the ability to link play in tight spaces when he receives the ball between the lines. His ball carrying ability at the moment certainly isn't elite, at least when compared against other attacking midfielders, though if you compare him scoring against midfielders, he does rank very high for these metrics like progressive carries, as well as his carries into the final third and into the penalty area. And I think this is a part of Mount's game that he does need to develop, particularly being able to turn out of pressure with his back to goal, as this will enable him to transition into that Frankie de Jong-like midfield role, dropping into the defensive third to aid with ball progression when coming up against an aggressive press. But another part of Mount's game that I really like is his ability to receive the ball side on and swivel away from an oncoming pressing player on the half turn, and he does this particularly well in the final third around the box, and so that's why I think Mount's best role would be as a roaming playmaker, where he can drop in front of the opposition's midfield line to get on the ball in order to utilise his long range passing, but then also drift in behind the opposition's midfield line, receiving the ball between the lines of the opposition's defensive shape, where he's then able to use his skill effectively to get into a chance creating position, particularly from crossing positions, where his delivery is excellent, capable of bending in those De Bruyne-esque crosses from a slightly narrower position, putting the ball into the corridor of uncertainty between the opposition's goalkeeper and centre backs. And to be honest, I think Ten Hag wants Mount for this specific reason, and not only because it is the optimal way of getting the best out of Mount himself, but also getting the best out of the likes of Anthony, Sancho, and maybe Amad Diallo as well. In Ten Hag's settled possession shape, which is likely to be some variation of a 3-2-5, a 2-3-5 or a 3-1-6, Mount would be best when taking up a position in the right-sided half space, not only because it would allow Bruno Fernandes to take up a more permanent position on the left side and add more balance to United's attack, but also because when the ball is switched over to the right side with the wide attacker Anthony, Sancho, or maybe even Amad Diallo, both Mount and Wan-Bissaka can provide the movement ahead of the right winger, with Mount specifically being able to make those underlapping runs between the fullback and centre back, looking to receive the ball in a close range shooting position inside of the box, being released into a wide shooting position, or even pulling away opposition players to open up that space on the edge of the box for Anthony or Amad to cut into. Alongside this, he also has his most eye-catching attribute, which is his goal scoring, with Mount being an excellent medium range shooter, backing up the attack from deep and arriving late on the edge and just inside of the box, just as his current manager Frank Lampard used to. And like Lampard, Mount has his natural composure when receiving the ball in these positions, executing these sometimes first time shots with tremendous amount of technique and composure, whilst being a player who in general is always a threat in and around the box and being a good finisher when the chances come his way. And we can see this goal scoring ability when we look back through his output from previous seasons. This season, Mount has only managed 3 goals and 6 assists in 35 games in all competitions, but a season before in 21-22 he managed 13 goals and 16 assists, whilst also playing 53 games in all competitions. 32 in the Premier, he managed double figures for both goals and assists with 11 and 10 respectively. And to be honest, up until this season, Mount seemed to be progressing significantly year on year in the goal scoring department, as in the 2020-21 season he managed 9 goals and 9 assists in 54 games in all competitions. In 19-20 that was 8 goals and 6 assists in 53 games, showing us that not only has Mount been increasing his goal contributions by 2 or 3 a season consistently up until this season, but he also seems to be a player who is reliable and durable, capable of playing 50 plus game seasons while still producing a high amount of output. And I think the amount of games that a player can actually play each season, whilst also being able to maintain a high level of consistency, is actually an extremely underrated attribute, and so this is always a bonus. United do already have this with Bruno Fernandes, who over the years has shown that he's more than capable of playing 35 plus Premier League games in a season, whilst Christian Eriksen has managed just 26 games in the Premier League this season. And so by bringing in Mount to effectively play ahead of Christian Eriksen in that midfield three of Casemiro in behind Fernandes and Mount himself, then Ten Hag has a midfield three that is not going to be broken up as much throughout the season as it has been this season, with Casemiro also being a player who isn't very injury prone, and if he can adjust his rashness at certain times and not get sent off as much, he could easily play 35 games plus in the Premier League next season. And just look at what having a consistent starting lineup available and injury free can do for a side, with Arsenal producing output well above what was expected of them at the start of the season, adding another reason to the list for why Mason Mount could be a diamond in the rough for Ten Hag.